Right, are we on? Good morning, everybody. Thanks to Toby for that. Probably for the football sales guys in the room, you think, oh my lord, how depressing is that? How on earth am I going to get some traction with brands? So hopefully this session will help a little bit with that. Before we kick off, I'm just curious to know the sort of the makeup of the room. Could we have a quick show of hands for the brands in the room, which I'm assuming is going to be a very small number. 1, 2, 3. So 3 brands, football clubs, a dozen or so. People from the media, a couple. And kind of if you broadly categorize yourself as a supplier, a football supplier. What does that leave us with then? There's lots of people in the room. Agencies? Okay, cool. It's just interesting to know the broad makeup of the audience so we can kind of direct our efforts. So what we wanted to discuss, I guess, and to expand a little bit on what Toby has discussed is a proposition. I don't think it's us or the European Sponsorship Association being particularly pointy, but it's a proposition that change is required in the world of football. And one feels I'm former CEO, 13 years at Fast Track, and I think we felt certainly that there was a groundswell of opinion that change was required, not necessarily just in football, but in the way that sponsorship is sold. So really what we wanted to do was get the opinions of 3 terrific brands, 1 terrific rights holder in the room, and then open it up to the floor to get questions from the floor later on. And the subject of the session, as you've seen from the briefing, is why rights holders need to start acting like brands. I guess more specifically for this session, I translate that as why football rights holders will benefit from acting and thinking like brands to ensure continued commercial success. 4 terrific panelists representing the brand fraternity. We have Tim Ellerton, who's Global Sponsorship Manager at Heineken, in the thick at the moment of Rugby World Cup activation, which is kicking off in 10 days' time, yep. I guess. We have Nathan Homer, Head of Global Sponsorship and Partnerships at Barclays. Again, I guess, in the thick of preparing for Rugby World Cup, but also, as you all know, very active currently in the world of football. And Nathan, until relatively recently, was at P&G running all of their Olympic programs. So I think that'll be an interesting comparison to make. Toby has introduced himself already, and we have Julie from the Head of International Business Development from FC Barcelona. He would describe the most loved football brand in the world, and I'm sure the football people in the room would take issue with that, but nope, that's tough on them. Really I'd like to kind of separate this discussion into 2 halves. One is what's happening today, and then a little bit about what we think tomorrow could look like in the world of sponsorship. So could we kick off then with just a brief summary from kind of each of the panelists about the organisations you work for. What are the primary business objectives at a holistic level that your businesses are trying to drive? And how has football sponsorship particularly helped your organisations to deliver some of those objectives? And let's start at this end and work along.
Okay, morning everyone. It's quite a broad topic, Andy, but I guess for Heineken we've been involved with Champions League as a company since 94, and as a brand since 2005. It was Amstel brand previously. And I guess it needs to deliver on a number of things. We obviously need to sell more beer off it. We're not apologetic about that. We absolutely want to create awareness for our brand. And a lot of people think that they've all heard of Heineken, or at least I hope you have. But actually, in terms of global beer volume, it's only just about 1%. So there's a hell of a lot of work we need to do in terms of awareness that Champions League helps us with. And then thirdly, I guess we want to be part of the conversation. So on any Champions League match night, you only need to look in social channels to see that people are talking about the Champions League, and we want to add value to that conversation in a credible way. We've done that through various initiatives, particularly this season, the season just gone and the season prior, with something called #ChampionTheMatch, which completely dominated the Twitter world during match night, with over 80% of the sponsored content was coming from Heineken. So it's something we're very proud of. And I guess they'd be our 3 main objectives.
Nathan?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it makes a lot of difference whether you're at Barclays or at Procter & Gamble, where I used to be, you know, and you're selling branded products like Gillette or whatever. I think, you know, fundamentally, you know, most of why you do what you do is for two reasons. If you sit in the marketing and sponsorship world, it's to help your business sell more, because that's what the business is there for, and alongside that, to protect and grow your brand. And those two things are obviously fundamentally interlinked. One is often more short-term, I just want to sell more product quickly, and one is more the mid to long-term healthy brand that enables the sales of the business. And I think, you know, quite often when we look at sponsorship or talk about sponsorship, we see people talk about it like it's this unique, separate piece. And actually, you know, sponsorship is part of the marketing mix, and the marketing is only there, you know, as Toby had on one of his charts, seeing how you deliver against your business objectives. So, you know, I don't think, you know, do Barclays do something different with football than Gillette did, for example? No. You know, the core things that drive what you do are the same. The product you happen to have are just different, but I don't think, you know, the bit that I find challenging is when people kind of separate them out into the business, the marketing, the sponsorship, when, you know, they're clearly just totally interrelated.
And we're going to reflect on that a little bit later, I think, in terms of how sponsorship, you know, especially in the world of the European Sponsorship Association, sponsorship used to be this thing that you could identify and point at. And you could point at the sponsorship department and the sponsorship person that just did what they did. They worried about hospitality and branding and not too much more. But actually the world has evolved miles since then, and so we'll come back to that a little bit later. I don't know, Toby, if you've got anything more to add on that subject from Castrol, from some of the organisations you've worked with relatively recently.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I agree with Nathan in terms of, you know, the objectives are really pretty much the same across most brands, you know, broadly. You know, you want to shift some brand perception, image, awareness, propensity to purchase, you know, and you want to sell stuff. But the interesting thing is that I've seen is that the way the brands are using sponsorship, certainly in the last 5-10 years, has shifted from it being a tactic and actually having budgets. You know, there used to be a time we used to go to the CMO and say, can I have some budget, I want to sponsor something. Now, you go to the CMO and say, here's our sponsorship strategy, here's what we're going to spend our marketing budget on. You don't go asking for extra money. Because sponsorship tends to be a core theme in achieving, this point I was trying to make earlier, sponsorship tends to be a core theme in achieving ultimately your business objectives. It's not a tactical thing. You can be used tactically, especially when you're talking about launching a product, but generally, you know, big brands like ours would use it at the core of our business.
And Julia, FC Barcelona, kind of a similar question to you, just coming from the other side of the fence. What are the brands that are coming to you asking the world's most loved football brands to help them with? What are the challenges that brands currently have that they think your football club can help them with around the world?
Well, first thing, I wish the brands would come to us, as you say. That would make our job way easier. It's true that sometimes it happens, and FC Barcelona, it's a very popular brand and property, and it happens from time to time, but we still need to go after the brands and do all the process of sponsorship sales as you were describing. Nothing is easy in the sales world, and everybody that is involved in sales know that there's not such thing as an easy sale. No? But I think that answering your question, we have very different needs from brands or requests, because being a global property or even a global brand, as FC Barcelona is, as Nathan was probably saying, we have companies like brands like the ones we have here, which are top of the line brands with their processes, internal process. They know their objectives. You know, they maybe they are not interested anymore in awareness. They are more interested in other things. What can they do with the club? How can they link to the values, etc. But when you are covering the whole world, you have different markets and different needs. So for instance, a global brand, an American brand, or a European brand that is very mature in the world of sponsorship would have a certain need. But when you talk about a company in the Middle East or in South America or in Southeast Asia, maybe the need is completely different. So maybe there are some companies or brands that really are in this initial phase where they require awareness and they want to link to football and FC Barcelona because of that. That's one scenario. The other scenario is that top of the line brands that are really well established, have been doing sponsorship for a long time, they want to do something more, And this is where what we're saying here is really applicable. We need to think more like the brands. We need to change our speech. The LED speech and some pictures of where your logo can be, it's not valid anymore for those brands.
And Tim, Nathan, I wonder if we could just quickly reflect, because clearly within your portfolio you do a whole range of things, and Nathan, you've recently been at P&G running, I think, one of the most famous Olympic activation programs, the Thank You Mums campaign, which I know we'll all know about. I wonder if it's worth just briefly reflecting on what football delivers for your organisations, and what, Tim, in your instance, what the Rugby and Rugby World Cup might deliver. Nathan, in your example, what the Olympics delivered for P&G, and what football delivers for Barclays. It's just worth, I think, for the audience reflecting a little bit on what football's good at and what rugby and the Olympics is good at, and whether there's anything football can learn from those things.
I think we're involved in football, and specifically we say we're involved in Champions League football, not necessarily football general, though a lot of our markets do have local deals with various clubs. But let's talk specifically Heineken brand, because the Champions League, whilst played in Europe, is ultimately a global property, and there's not that many true global properties, annual ones at least, that are out there. I mean, of course, Olympics, Euros, World Cup, etc. That's every 4 years. The beauty of the Champions League, in our opinion, is it plays a dual role. As I said at the start, it can play an awareness play in markets where we are very small and building our brand, but in markets where we're hugely established or market leader in, say, Netherlands or Spain, Italy, places like that, it actually builds on brand equity and can really shift the dial in terms of our sales objectives. So that's why we're with that property. I could probably count on one hand the amount of markets that something like the Champions League property is not relevant to. Specifically to your question around Rugby World Cup, what we find with rugby is that they are already a very loyal Heineken follower. It tends to, let's be honest, lean to a more premium demographic, which is perhaps more suited to us as the world's international premium beer. But it does cover a small amount of markets. But in those markets such as Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, France, the UK, Ireland, and Argentina to an extent, rugby is hugely popular. And as I say, we've been involved with that sport since 1995, and it plays much more of a loyalty role, perhaps more so than Champions League can, specifically in those territories.
Nathan, reflecting on your amazing time at P&G around the Olympics.
I think
I'm putting words in your mouth by describing it as amazing, obviously. But
so
I think
it wasn't. I'm not sure getting the hotels ready in Russia was quite so amazing. But anyway, that's a different matter. I think the fundamental thing, is pretty similar to what Tim's just described of what you're trying to do in both cases. I mean, what's the difference? The Olympics are every 2 years. In about 70 of the markets, it was a big 2-year, sort of 3-month focus. What does football do differently? Well, it is pretty much always on now. Yeah. If you take the Premier League as a great example, huge global reach, relevant and a dominant passion in a lot of the markets we play in fact, nearly all of them, actually, and it's on all the time. It starts at the beginning of August, it finishes at the end of May, and through the summer there's constant rumours of, transfers, managers, that you can still play off and keep a constant pace. So I think football offers a real all year round, the days of football being a winter game, are gone. It gives you an ability to tour all year round and, with a myriad of assets. I think by far the biggest shift, and, the P&G's Olympic campaign was a good example of it. We worked, Gillette as a brand at P&G, we worked with over 30 different football organisations, primarily national governing bodies. And again, the simple reason for both of those, which Barclays is probably, we're on an evolution towards, is using those things not for the blunt awareness, because that's not the stage most of those brands are at, but using it to really drive engagement and content. And you say, well, why is that important? We're just running a campaign through Africa that is literally about open a bank account, take a loan, use your credit card to pay for things, which is the life cycle they're at in the banking kind of market there. And we ran the campaign without just kind of standalone marketing. We're running it using all of the assets from the Premier League. We see engagement levels go through the roof. And the really important thing is the consideration levels therefore change, and consideration turns to purchase. And so we're actually seeing the business style change because the engagement is different. So, you know, what does football bring to our messaging? I always say, you know, we're a bank. It's not that interesting. I'm sure when you get a letter in the post from the bank, you don't open it thinking this will be a good read. I can't wait to sit down on the sofa and have a read of it. If I send it you and it's got some of the assets we have from the Premier League in it, it at least makes you think, oh, this looks interesting. And hopefully when you read it, you think, actually, I might get involved. That sounds a bit more of a reason for me to lean forward. So, you know, why do we do sponsorship? Well, it's for passion. Why does football work? Because it is a dominant cultural passion in a lot of markets. And the fact now it's very all year round, it does offer something that some of the properties don't.
And Julie, you were at Cirque du Soleil before you joined FC Barcelona, so I guess you've seen a very, very different proposition to take to market, an entirely different level of passion and engagement that you're now selling, I suppose.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And I think what's a bit common with FC Barcelona is that we had a story to tell, and it was a lot about brands that wanted to associate with those values of uniqueness, of creativity, of being a pioneer in an industry. In the case of Cirque du Soleil, I couldn't count on any LED or any TV exposure, so it was really about that. So it was really about a concept story, a nice story, I think, this back then for sure. And I think that it's at the end you can, it's not replicating, but you learn a lot from what you did in the past, and when you sell, there's something that is really always common. And I think that, to your point before, Toby, I think that just when you start explaining what's your property, you need to explain what it's about, on the sense of, you know, what can it bring on the table, why are we different, why is Cirque du Soleil something different, what's the story behind it, why is FC Barcelona different than any other club that is trying to sell sponsorship. I think in both cases you need to relate to the tradition, to the history, to what happened in the previous 20 years in the case of Cirque du Soleil, 100 years in the case of FC Barcelona. And both, when you could enable to put this connection with the brand on a personal level, either because this person likes circus or the Cirque du Soleil concept, or because this person likes the FC Barcelona philosophy, that helps a lot then afterwards to continue the dialogue. It might end up with a sale or not, because you never know, and there are different factors apart than the personal, but it helps you to create this emotional link and to position yourself as something different and see if that might work for the brand, but something different and special. And I think that when you have a special value, you need to use it a lot in your sales proposition in order to engage with the person that is in front of you and is trying to understand what we can do for them.
In terms of, if we move to the kind of tomorrow conversation, it's interesting if we reflect on the organisation that is the European Sponsorship Association. It's interesting, about a year ago we sat down and said, you know, what do we define our organisation as? What do we think about sponsorship? And actually I think the European Sponsorship Association felt that it was becoming a bit marginalised by trying to point specifically at what sponsorship was about. I think our view was that the industry is moving so fast, and that, as we've already heard from the panel, that sponsorship is now more integrated than it ever has been before. Every single big brand in the world that uses sponsorship uses it across all of their channels. And so marketing directors increasingly are seeing the power of that connection with people's passions, you know, with rugby, with football, with the clubs that we've heard from today. And if we quote ESSA, having done a lot of thinking about what the future of ESSA looks like and what the future of the sponsorship industry should look like, ESSA would say, we truly believe in the power of sponsorship to inspire more engaging marketing. So that means that sponsorship isn't necessarily a thing, a department that you can point at. Sponsorship is about wrapping this passionate connection with consumers around every piece of marketing that you're doing, every piece of outbound communication that your organisation is pushing out into the world. And that power of inspiring more engaging marketing will enable accelerated growth by connecting with people through their passions to enhance their experience and forge more meaningful relationships. So that's what ESSA now talk about. And for us, the modern world of sponsorship, there are probably 2 or 3 real imperatives. There's this thought, and Tim, you said it earlier, about how do brands tangibly add value to the sporting experience for their customers. So you can't just have a sponsorship where there's a logo on the backboard. Actually, the brand needs to feel like it's adding value, tangibly adding value to their consumers' passions of that sport. I think increasingly, and again we've heard it a lot today, rights holders have to allow their partners to tell an active and engaging story about their role in the sport. Don't be afraid actually to allow your sponsors to become part of the narrative of your football club or your league. It's a really, really important thing, and all of the brands, not just the three on the stage here, but all brands in the world now, will want to tell a really active and engaging story around their partnership. And storytelling is a thing that kind of every agency talks actively about, not just sponsorship agencies, but advertising agencies and media agencies. We have to think about storytelling.
But on that, Andy, just to chip in on that, I think you know, one of the most fundamental shifts that certainly I look for is, you know, the days where people turn up, they said, these are our assets, can I have a check? You know, they're the last people we want to deal with. You know, I think if you talk about what do we want from people, not in the future today, the people that are impressive are people that come and say, this is where we're going, these are the parts of our journey, and we think you guys could be an amazing partner to help us on this part. You know, if you just want us as a partner because you can give us something to help us, for me, it's a one-way sell. You know, what we want, and the best people that come and sell are people that are clear on what they're trying to achieve and can see why through a partnership with you, not only can you achieve what you want, which is essential, but actually they understand and tell you why it's important to them and why, because effectively that means you get really active, true collaboration because you're helping them with part of their story as well as helping with it. And I think that's something that you don't see in most pitches. So I think that change in, you know, not just being willing to let brands tell a bigger story as part of your story, but actually start with that fundamental, which part of our story is that brand going to help us with?
Yeah. And I think, adding to what Nathan is saying, I think that we, at least I personally, the word sponsor, I think sometimes it has a bit of a negative connotation on that sense, you know. I think that's why we use more and more the word partnership, the word partner, because it's where you can have this type of conversation. When you are looking for sponsorship, it really looks like you're asking for money. And yes, you are asking for money, it's true, but the way things have developed, there are so many things where you can deliver value to both entities that you need to explore those and then ask the money. But if you start the conversation with sponsorship and a fee, it's a very cold way to start, and it doesn't go that well.
It's a real evolutionary pressure on the industry, isn't it? That, you know, we all, even the association still talks about sponsorship, and yet the industry is going, well, what does sponsorship mean? And so it is a much bigger thing. And you're right, it's about partnerships, it's about giving.
It's a mindset. The other thing is, it leads to a true difference in mindset and skill set. You know, if you look, I think, in the past, and maybe even today, people are sponsorship experts or marketeers or salespeople. You know, I've done sales training, I've done marketing training, I've done sponsorship. You know, I think in the future, you know, and again, when we look at people, it's very obvious if someone who comes to see you is a salesman only. It's equally very obvious if they're a marketing personality. And in our organisation, I see people that are really good at sponsorship, really good at marketing, don't have any idea how those things really connect to commercial imperatives. And it's equally true when you see rights holders. You know, when people come, it's really obvious. And the people that stand out are the people that have got a broader, multifunctional, if you want to use the word, skill set. Well, yeah, of course they need to have an element of the skills that are to do with sales. So, you know, you are going to negotiate, you are going to do that kind of stuff. But they also understand the marketing and brand piece. And ideally have got a strong sense of the commercial. So I think going forward, people are going to have a much broader skill set too.
The sponsorship, the role of sponsorship manager is dying. You go to Diageo, they don't have it. You know, we're a dying breed. Diageo don't have sponsorship managers; they have brand managers, and they do everything. And they have to be, as Nathan just said, experienced in all of those assets.
Yeah, but I think 10 years ago, marketing directors frequently didn't have their arms around sponsorship quite like they do today. And I think now every single marketing director would have ultimate control over the integration of the assets in sport and across their other marketing channels as well.
And it's one thing on that is, and if I use the Heineken example, when I joined Heineken 7.5 years ago, it's been as long as that, you know, we had sponsorship we had brand campaigns, and then there was this thing called sponsorship campaigns, and they lived over here, and they didn't really relate to what the brand was talking about. Now we've launched 3 campaigns this year, of which the Champions League campaign was the biggest, next to the James Bond campaign, which is coming up in the next few months. So we've moved from that, oh, what do we do about this sponsorship thing, and we send lots of people to matches and they have a nice time, to that's front and center of our marketing initiative and our campaign. Our markets, are planning, you know, a year and a half ahead of how they're going to use something like the Champions League, which is why, you know, we've signed up for a further 3 years to build their brand. They're not just saying, well, let's use it for some trade activation like we traditionally did. The other thing I think is important is that sponsorship or partnership, whatever we want to call it, has to play a much bigger role than just a branding exercise or a CSR exercise. It has to work across everything. So we deal daily with the CSR team, the PR team, the trade marketing team, the above the line. It has to affect everything we do. We have an important job on the responsible consumption of alcohol. We use our sponsorship platforms for that. So it has to work a lot harder than the traditional logos on a board like the one behind me.
Yeah, and that demands a different approach from the rights holder community, that they understand all of that stuff. The third thing, back to the ESSA conversation, I think this idea of direct to consumer, I think the rights holders need to recognise that they have to allow brands to use their assets to build direct relationships with their customers. So giving you access to their data, giving you access to their social and digital channels, so that direct to consumer channel is open to them. And again, I've worked with brands where that's been a real challenge with the football community, and so that's another thing that everybody needs to keep in mind. But all of that clearly adding value, about storytelling, about direct relationships, all of that clearly is still underpinned, as Toby said earlier, by kind of the basic essence of this industry, which is about driving awareness, about building visibility, and that's ultimately one of the key things that underpins why brands do sponsorship. So the question, I guess, that we're moving towards is, you know, do we need to shift the focus of the football community from principally an asset sell? Toby, you mentioned that earlier about shirt and perimeter and backdrop and hospitality, and move towards partnerships that offer smart access to data, genuinely integrated digital and social assets that help the way you can tell your story around this sponsorship, supported by those traditional assets that are an important part of what you buy, but also, I think quite importantly, a more proactive approach by the clubs and the rights holders themselves to put really good creative ideas in front of you. I think if that's happened, I think the industry would move forward quite quickly. So let me go back to the panel again then with that in mind. And we touched on this a little bit. The sponsorship dynamics in your business, are you being asked to do different things, think about different things, use those assets in a different way? Are the people above you in your organisations challenging you in a different, more unique way than they ever have before? Or is it more or less the same?
It probably depends where you are. I think if you take a company like P&G, you know, sponsorship has always been totally embedded in the marketing, and the marketing people run the business. So you have a very rounded kind of engagement. I think someone like Barclays, it's more of a journey where you have maybe traditionally had the business, the marketing, the sponsorship groups, and there's a journey to kind of bring that stuff together. But I mean, I think the stuff we talked before just stands true, which is, you know, people that are bringing a piece of, you know, this is why we genuinely want you as a partner. This is the role we can help you with and you can help us with. You know, let's build that. That's the story we could build together. And then on top, there's some of the stuff I could almost, do the traditional things matter? You know, billboards, hospitality, you know, they're almost the easy ones. Do they matter? Yeah, they do. Actually, you know, taking our clients to stuff and being able to go in the director's box and then meet players with top clients is important. It really is, because with them, the core marketing objective is actually about relationship and trust building. And that comes from having that special money can't buy experience. So it's not that all the old assets aren't worth having, they are. But for me, they almost become the simple bit of quick negotiation. And actually the real meat in the discussion of the partnership now is, you know, the other things around that allow you to really tell the story and engage.
Yeah, I think from my own experience at Heineken, certainly I don't think anyone's doubting our sponsorship portfolio, or at least I hope they aren't. You know, we've been Heineken Cup lead sponsors since '95. We've been Rugby World Cup, Champions League for as long as 20 years just had our 21st year, in fact. There's no doubt there. What it needs to do, however, is work a lot harder across a lot more markets.
Yeah.
And that's what we try and categorize our markets by terms of their size and also their brand position. That's not, that's not rocket science, but what we then do is find, okay, what is it about the Champions League asset that helps a market like the Philippines, where we're just trying to build our brand and have only just entered that market very recently, or Netherlands, where we're 67% market share. So it's about finding the role that Champions League plays across a whole heap of different markets, and also, as I said, previous point, not just in the traditional, okay, that's our branding exercise. It needs to work on PR, below the line, CSR, etc.
I think the danger that sponsorship has within football, for example, is brands like my own, where I've just come from, Castrol, Vodafone, to name two, who are going out and actually creating their own assets. Vodafone pulling out of Formula One, pulling out of football. They don't buy assets now; they create their own. And Castrol has been doing a bit of that as well. So that's a danger. Big brands actually moving into a space like Red Bull, where they're creating their own. I mean, Red Bull make billions out of the content from their partnership programs. It's a phenomenal. It's a business now. Forget about sponsorship. Forget about brand partnership. They are making money out of content from the relationships they have with people in sport and endeavour and activity and whatever. That's going to happen more and more. And the decision between sponsoring Barcelona, who've got a really nice brand story and are loved by the world, or going out and creating their own festival or whatever it might be, which is what Vodafone are starting to do, that's going to be playing more and more into the world. And I think, for me, within the brand I've just come from, they're asking that question. Is the brand friction, is the sponsorship option as good as creating our own?
And Tim, we talked briefly earlier about how some of the rights holders are changing their approach, and you were saying that UEFA are recognising the change in this market. I wonder if just briefly reflect on that, if there's...
Yeah, I think that's an example of a rights holders. At least we're going on a journey with them. So we have regular meetings with them, and in particularly their digital department, which is probably the area of most most interest for us, to say, look, what is it that they've got 60-something million fans on Facebook. We've got 18. How we can create some synergies there. And they're helping us, with our initiatives. So they're posting all our content. We're working together. So it's not just they have a different target market than we do in some ways, but also their objectives might differ. So we find a common ground. So it's important that we take all our partners on that journey. We've done the same with the IRB, or now World Rugby. And that's for any rights holders in the room, that's a conversation a brand like us will always want to have, is, okay, what are the objectives we have here? So UEFA, for example, I see Philippe's in the room, he knows this more than anyone, they are beholden to the 53, or is it 54 unions of Europe. So it's not their job to market the Champions League to Asia or South America. However, they come to us because they know we have a footprint in that territory, and we do that for them. And we talk about a Heineken message. We make no apologies for that, but we link our Champions League message to it. So it's a bit cheesy, but it's a win-win situation.
So one more question from me, and then we're going to open it up for 10 minutes or so of questions from the floor. So do have a think about questions if you have one, and we'll take them in about 5 minutes. So the final thing then, I just wanted to reflect a little bit more on what Toby was saying earlier about the number of proposals that the people on the stage get, and also, Julie, from your perspective, the proposals that you push out into the world. So Barclays last year, I think this is the right number, got 9,645 sponsorship approaches, and it sounds like there's a pretty rigorous process in place to deal with those and to select the very small number that I'm guessing get some traction within the organisation. But I wondered if you could reflect on the best proposals, the best approach. How should the world of football and sponsorship sales be thinking about approaching your organisations? Toby obviously heard you earlier talking about it's all about building relationships, and I understand that completely, having kind of been a bit of a salesman within an agency as well. It's exactly the same game. But I wonder if we could reflect on what are the really great proposals you've seen. Have you bought from unsolicited approaches? And what's the best way for the salespeople in the room to think about coming after your business?
I think the key word for me would be, or two words would be, tailored and or bespoke. So Nathan works for a bank, I work for a beer. It's very obvious when a presentation has just insert or find word Barclays, take it out, put in Heineken. So his objectives are going to be very different from ours. Understanding our business, you know, we had something the other day, if we want to sponsor the One Direction tour. The average age of the One Direction fan, I guess, is probably 12 or 13 years old. That's not great for a beer. So
It could be a good concert, though,
Yeah,
I'm
it would be good. Yeah. So you know, in terms of really understanding of our business objectives, where you know, just read the annual report. I don't know, find out where you know Heineken's ambition are, short term, mid term, long term, and actually make it bespoke to what we need. You know, and finding ways in which, for example, with the Dutch Olympic Committee, they came to us because they had a problem back in 2000 that they had loads of supporters. Loads of families going, but nowhere for them to meet. So we created the Holland Heineken House, which was run by Heineken and became the place to meet for Dutch Olympic fans. And now at the last Olympics in London, it was 8,000 people sold out every single night from fans from all around the world. That's a natural place for Heineken to play, bringing the entertainment, bringing the party, bringing the after-match, you know, social occasion, if you like. So ideas that actually, you know, tick a box for our brand are always going to be more beneficial than you get this amount of LED boards and this amount of tickets.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's not a huge amount to add. The other one that I always say to people is, you know, the simple way to get a long list of people is to look at who's already in the industry, who's already in the thing, who's a big brand, and start going, I'm going to cover those 200. I actually think, because actually to do what Tim's just said takes time and work, there's nothing wrong with starting with that long list, but then actually to step back and say, what have we got to offer? Therefore, instinctively, which of those does it feel based on what I already know about them? You know, and actually, as fast as you can, narrow it down to, don't do 200 where you change the logo and post it. Do 10 where you do the research and you go, actually, I can see a good connection and fit here. So, I mean, my advice is always, you know, same as who do we look for? Well, we look to target the right consumer and do the classic kind of bullseyeing in. You know, spend the time on the ones where it feels as if there's a clear link to you.
And back to
actually,
the
if you
type.
can't do it, and it's the blunt thing, if you can't do it, it says to me you don't know what you're selling.
Actually, one of the best ones we had quite recently was a football club that will remain nameless that came in with no presentation, and they listened to us. So first of all, they got the meeting in the first place, but that was because of the level in the world of football they're at. Once they had that meeting, they then said, right, rather than come in and drown you with 50 slides on said football club, we're going to listen to you about where your objectives are, where your business is, what gap this football club might fill that we currently don't have in our sponsorship portfolio, how it would complement what we do with Champions League, for example, and then came back 3 weeks later and presented to us. So, you know, that's another way, is actually use your ears before your mouth first to really understand the business and how that works, and then come back with a proposal bespoke to that brand.
And connected it to their own brand
Correct.
story, I guess, as well, which is an important part, the title of the session, I suppose,
And actually
thinking about yourselves as a
And
brand.
the other bit that leads to that, and it's a very tough dynamic, because I've sat in a salesperson's shoes, is instinctively you've got short-term targets and you want to hit them. Whereas actually the people that I'd say I generally will listen to, answer the phone to, have a chat with at something like this are the people I have built a relationship with. They haven't just tried to cram a square kind of peg into a round hole for a short-term win. They've kept the thing that actually, you know, whether they work for a rights holder or in the business, they've kind of built the right relationship with the right people. And actually, guess what? 3 years down the line, 6 years down the line, 9 years down the line, they've come with something that absolutely fits perfectly. And because they've spent the time to show you, they don't just try and flog you stuff. They actually come when it's the right thing. It's got far more credibility, gets listened to far more, and you know the sale comes then. And that's a bit of your balancing the brand, which is mid to long term, both of yourself personally, by the way, and of your rights, but also with the short term
I think
selling.
a quick check on
It's tough.
exactly on Wikipedia and Heineken sponsorship will tell you that our 3 most successful sponsorships, the Champions League, the Rugby World Cup, and the European Rugby Tournament, what was the Heineken Cup, are all at 20 years plus. We are. It's pretty obvious that we're in these partnerships for the long term. So coming in, as Nathan said, with the short-term mentality and ridiculous number that that it isn't going to work. It's about, okay, we see that you're on a journey. This is what we want to do year 1 to 3. This is where we see that, our organisation benefiting you years 3 to 6, et cetera, et cetera.
Julie, the people that you've been out to tell the FC Barcelona brand story to, where's the success come from? What's been the most engaging story there?
Our approach, it's quite simple, I have to say. I know that there are some football clubs that have a more flashy approach when they visit a brand. We like to, first we do a bit of work beforehand, as you guys are saying, to see if there's a specific fit with our values, our story, or there's a specific need for a brand that they want to go global and might be the right moment to step in, etc. So there's a pre-work, some research that needs to make a link when you connect with somebody. And then, honestly, when we go to visit a marketing director, a CMO, or CEO even, our approach is quite simple. We have a presentation with who we are, our values, what we represent. We have a video. It's quite emotional. I think that after all, it works in sales to have a video. Sometimes it's better a 1-minute video with nice music, and especially if it's something that appealing as football that people might enjoy rather than a super long presentation. But we have a document to present, but we cut all the slides that were explaining our partnership package and what we deliver, what we can do for you. We cut that. When we go to a brand, we explain who we are. As Tim was saying, we want to listen a lot, because I think that's what, Tim obviously said, appreciate. We don't go there like, this is our package, this is what we can do for you, do you want it yes or no? I don't think that works. I think it's like going there, trying to establish a relationship, if you can, go for dinner, be in touch, invite them for a game, etc. And then you can establish a connection there, and then in the discussion, you find out there's a specific need or there's something that you can fulfill, then you can come back with a proposal, and then you are in another stage of the conversation. But I think that sometimes salespeople, I've been very obsessed with this first meeting, coming with, it's a super moment, and it's not. It's really like stepping in the right way, not trying to be too ambitious, not trying to try to show the brand you know more than them, because it's not true. Try to listen a lot, explain very honestly who you are, and if there is a fit or an interest, you will sit in that meeting, and then you are one step ahead.
Yeah. And that, just to come back, as I said about spend the time doing a bit more research on the right ones, get that time from not doing. Tim and me, I can imagine, can guess what our logo looks like on a billboard at your stadium. But the number of times we see all these slides, and they've put it onto everything, and I go, just don't waste your time on that. Yeah. Spend the time on doing 2 or 3 really good things up front that tell us who you are, what your objectives are, and doing a bit of research on what we're likely to respond to, because all of that that's almost the box ticking.
Andy, I just want to say, I know we've got some agencies here. I would say that the best proposal I've ever seen, or presentation I've ever seen, was from an agency quite recently that came in and actually demonstrated a completely new approach to how to engage audiences. And if they'd said go and sponsor a kite flying competition in Japan because of this insight, we'd have considered it. It was really quite radical. They came in, they said, we'd like to demonstrate to you a new approach to how to engage audiences. Bang. The whole, we could have filled that room with the whole marketing team, because everybody wanted to learn about it. It was an insight, it was inspirational. They walked out of the room, and actually they ended up doing quite a lot of work for us. So it was just something really inspiring. And it's exactly the same with a football club or a rights holder. You just got to come in and excite people. Give us something new. Tell us something different. If you come in and say, with the greatest respect, if Barcelona come in and say exactly the same as Man United or Liverpool or Bayern Munich, there's no differentiation. Come in and just be very different.
Grand. 4 minutes, 57 seconds left for questions. Does anybody have a question? Well, I don't know if we got mic. Yes, we have got microphones. Chap in the pink shirt here, and then the guy at the back after that.
Good afternoon. I work in Southeast Asia. We work with UNICEF using football as a tool for development. And one of the big challenges that we have, we work with quite a few large brands, global names, is there's quite a disconnect between sponsors, commercial departments, and CSR and foundations. And what we found is the trend in terms of, you spoke about a sponsorship shift and a paradigm shift. There's also a consumer shift. Consumers are now looking at businesses that have a mission. You know, I think what Toby touched on, what does your brand stand for? And we've seen the new the new billion-dollar companies like Uber and Airbnb. They have a social mission. They want to make the roads cleaner. So my question really is, one is, forgive me, I don't know the gentleman from Barcelona, your partnership with UNICEF, are there any tangible data that you have that relationship has been strengthened, or that it's actually brought value back to Barcelona through that partnership? And secondly, do you feel within your own businesses there should be more of a vertical integration between the activities of CSR as well as commercial sponsorships, just because they are now becoming more and more interlinked? And just finally, I know it's a long one, one of the challenges that we have also is, for example, if I use Hyundai as an example, they have a global sponsorship with the World Cup. If we're speaking to their local teams in Asia, there is a complete disconnect that their activities in Asia are nothing to do with football, as opposed to the head office which sponsors the World Cup. So again, it's very disconnected, it seems, and I just wondered if you feel that there needs to be more of an internal process to integrate that.
A lot of questions there.
Yeah.
So we start, Julie, with you, and let's be as prompt as we can so we can give some other people an audience. So.
Yeah, I'll try to respond as quick as I can. I mean, as you know, the UNICEF partnership comes a long way and start very strongly being on our jersey on match day, which, as Toby was saying, we're standing for something. We still are in terms of partnership with them. I mean, as you know, not in the front of the jersey, in the back. Actually, UEFA had to change the rule of having NGOs on the back because of the UNICEF push from our side. But from our side, the partnership with them remains as strong or even more in terms of what we're doing together with them, in terms of what we contribute. We still contribute $1.5 million to them every year. We have programs with them all over the world. We signed last year the 1 in 11 program in New York. We have, which is a different deal, but it comes together, Messi as a UNICEF ambassador. So it's our main partner for the foundation. We have. Sorry, are you
Anything back? How do you measure?
I mean, to be honest with you, I don't have anything to tell you. This is what we got back. I mean, it's really driven by our foundation. They have several programs around the world. We collaborate in different parts of the world. When we do the summer tour, we have specific activities with, with them. In the US, this summer we had an event with them where we brought players and so on, some kids to explain what we're doing. So it's not something that we do to measure. I mean, we do many things with them, different events, focus on youth, which is the main focus of our foundation. And I think that overall what has provided to us is a big help on the image of the club around the world. And that's, I think it's intangible. You cannot really measure that. It's huge. Everybody knows about the UNICEF partnership, but I cannot give you an exact number of anything more concrete than that. But it's been huge for the club, and it will remain to be as big for the future.
Quick reflection,
Okay,
maybe just
super
one
quick.
quick
I think
reflection.
the answer to your question is, from a normal brand point of view, as you measure it, you see whether it changes the brand equity scores, trust, warmth, and things like that. It's fairly simple. In terms of your question on CSR, I think part of the piece we talked before about commercial marketing sponsorship, CSR used to be another one. You know, that model was always wrong. It's now disappearing in almost all companies. The funding is still there, but it's coming in as part of one pot. And as you build a program, or certainly in our case, we're looking to do programs that deliver the traditional stuff, some of the new world stuff, and also the CSR element is absolutely lined up within that, which is a far more logical way for people to engage.
And I'd just say that the Hyundai scenario that you put in, the nuances in terms of charitable giving and awareness, you know, if you go to the former Eastern Bloc countries, charity is not on the radar. I just spent a week in Kiev on holiday, and you know, charity is not on their radar. They don't have charity. So to your point about Hyundai, you know, it doesn't fit their model everywhere.
I'm conscious that this red clock is flashing at me, but can we have one? Are we allowed one more question? The second man's put his hand up, which is the guy at the back left there, and I'm probably going to be given the thumb screws to shut up and get off stage and introduce the next panel.
Thank you. I thought all the stuff around moving from analog to digital really resonated. I think it's really obvious. One of the things that when we're talking to rights holders, I had a conversation with a commercial director from a football club, and kind of fairly candid. He said, look, my role is becoming more and more marginal because of the broadcast rights deal so big, and therefore for the brands to be important, the number needs to be so big, and therefore that becomes difficult to get. So how basically he was saying, how can I become more relevant? Because my chairman and my owner wants to see the manager more, he wants to see the people responsible for player trading. Actually, the commercial director has just gone down the pecking order. 10 years ago, it would have been completely different. So I think that's the challenge.
Yeah. I mean, but in my experience, the commercial revenue, the sponsorship revenue is still a line item on the budget, and it still gets the attention of the CFO and the CEO within the football club. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the TV money now is so significant, but the Premier League and the football clubs in the Premier League, I think, still worry a great deal about commercial revenue. But you're right, the balance of power has certainly shifted from sponsorship to broadcast. I think I'm probably going to have to shut up now, so apologies we couldn't take more questions, but thank you very much for listening. I think I'm handing over, once we do a little jiggery pokery with the microphones, to Ben Wells, who's going to talk a little bit more about the ESSA convention, but particularly this idea, is official dead? I know a lot of rights holders, especially in football, will sell official this and official that, but the debate is that model dead? Are we moving towards a new model? So give us 5 minutes to turn around and we'll be back, or Ben will be back. Thank you very much.